Have you ever wondered why some people change just one small habit, yet their whole life shifts in a completely different direction? While others put in years of effort, everything keeps repeating the same old loop, the same old relationships, the same old fears, the same failures wearing familiar faces. Carl Jung believed that life does not change simply because you want it to, but because you change the unconscious structure operating in the dark. And the only way to do that is to change the habits that shape your mind every single day. This world does not operate on luck. It operates on inner frequency. You live by a certain habit. You emit that frequency. The habits you nurture in silence, the way you think when no one is watching, the way you respond to difficulties, the way you face fear, the way you breathe, the way you walk. All of these shape your destiny far more powerfully than any opportunity or external event. Today's video will open a very different kind of journey, where the 12 habits Carl Jung left behind are not self-improvement tips, but 12 movements of the soul. And that is the spirit of the 12 habits from Carl Jung will completely transform your life. Each habit is a doorway, and when you walk deep enough into it, you won't just change yourself, you will return to the self, the still, powerful, and unshakable center that lies beneath every layer of fear, expectation, and noise in life. Let us slow down a little and release every assumption about your life being shaped by circumstances. Because from the moment you change the habits inside you, you are no longer living in your old reality. You are rewriting the operating system of your soul. Are you ready to open the first doorway? Number 1. The habit of self-observation. There are moments in life when you sit quietly in a familiar room. Everything around you looks the same: the lights, the desk, the sound of traffic outside. Yet suddenly you feel as if you are standing outside your own life. You look back at your day and don't really understand why you were angry in the morning, why your mood suddenly dropped at noon, or why you reacted so strongly just because of someone's accidental remark. Everything happened so fast that you didn't even realize it. Emotions carried you away, thoughts rushed in by instinct, and you were only running behind to manage the consequences. And then you ask yourself, am I living or just reacting? Carl Jung believed that the moment a person asks that question, the journey of transformation has already begun. Because self-observation is not an intellectual or academic skill. It is the moment you begin to separate consciousness from the unconscious, the moment you first see what I am feeling or how I am reacting, instead of letting everything run on automatic. Jung called this the first step of individuation, the journey of becoming yourself, no longer being moved like a puppet by the unconscious pulling strings from behind. When you observe yourself, you are not trying to change emotions, not trying to force thoughts to be silent, not judging yourself as right or wrong. You simply watch. And the paradox is, the very act of seeing already begins to change everything. Someone who knows how to observe themselves no longer falls into the spiral of unconscious reactions because they recognize that emotional explosions are signals, not identity. They see anger rising, but do not become the anger. They see fear returning, but are not swallowed by it. Jung once said, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown." And the moment you acknowledge your emotions, you are beginning to outgrow them, rather than being controlled by them. Observing yourself is like standing on a bridge watching the river flow beneath. You are not the rushing water, you are simply observing it. That is when you realize emotions come and go like waves, thoughts rise and fall like clouds, and you are the sky, vast and quieter than all of them. But to stand on that bridge, you must learn something most people never do in their whole life. Pause. Just a few seconds of observation is enough to open a doorway you never knew you had. Try looking back at your life. How many times have you reacted without knowing why? How many times have you said something hurtful and then regretted it for hours? How many times have you felt heavy inside without being able to name the sadness? Jung believed that whenever we fail to observe ourselves, we become victims of what is happening within us. But when we pause and look, even for 3 seconds, 3 breaths, we reclaim leadership of the mind. A woman I once worked with is the perfect example. She shared that she always felt insecure whenever her friends succeeded, not because she envied them, but because she felt inferior. She said that each time it happened, she tried to ignore the feeling by working harder or pretending to be cheerful. But in one therapy session, she was asked to simply sit still and observe that feeling for a few minutes. No running, no fixing, no defending, just observing. And something strange happened. The insecurity no longer overwhelmed her. It stood in front of her, smaller than she had imagined. She looked at it and said, "So this is the fear of being left behind." When she said that, she cried, not out of pain, but out of relief. Because only when you see the monster in the room do you realize it is not as big as when you imagined it in the dark. Someone who knows how to observe themselves is like someone turning on a light in a dark room. The light does not change the objects, but it makes you no longer afraid of them. According to Jung, observation is not just the first step, it is the foundation of all change. Without it, we are merely patching emotional fragments. With it, we begin to see the entire picture, patterns, causes, loops, and true motivations. Observation is not an act of intellect, it is an act of awareness. Not asking why, but asking what is happening inside me right now. Not analyzing, but sensing. Someone who lives at the level of observation is no longer quick to judge, no longer pulled into the chaotic stream of emotions. They are like a mountain climber in the fog. They do not chase each gust of wind. They stand still until the fog clears and the path appears. One winter morning, when I woke up early to write, there was a moment when I felt inexplicably heavy. In the past, I would have forced myself to work, pushed the feeling aside as if it were an obstacle. But that day, I paused, closed my eyes, and asked, "Where is this feeling coming from?" Just a few seconds, and I realized it was a worry about a responsibility I hadn't finished the day before. Once I saw that, the heaviness no longer weighed me down. I simply wrote on paper, "Finish this first." And I began. No fighting emotions, no resisting them. Just observing, then acting from clarity. That is what happens when you observe yourself. You are no longer dragged, you become the guide. At a deeper level, the habit of self-observation helps you see patterns that have repeated for years. Every strong reaction carries the imprint of the past. Every time you are triggered is an opportunity to see a part of the unconscious that has not yet been integrated. The more you observe, the more the unconscious comes into light, and the freer you become. Not free from life, but free from the patterns that shaped you since childhood. And when you practice this habit long enough, you will notice something miraculous. Most of what you thought were problems did not come from the world, but from the way you received it. Once you see this, you no longer try to fix the world. You fix yourself, and the world changes on its own. Jung once said, "A man who looks outside dreams, a man who looks inside awakes." Self-observation is the bridge from dreaming to awakening. It is quiet, unglamorous. No one praises you for it. No one even sees it. But it is the habit that can change your entire life. If you want to begin your journey of transformation through the 12 habits Jung believed could renew your entire inner world, then this is the first and most important habit. Just spending a few minutes each day observing your breath, emotions, thoughts, reactions, you will find yourself becoming clearer, lighter, less triggered, and more self-possessed. This is the foundation for moving into the next habits. Habits that will open one doorway after another. Doorways you never knew you already held the keys to. Number 2. The habit of removing the mask. Learning to live authentically. And once you learn the habit of observing yourself, the next natural thing that happens is that you begin to notice there is a shell you have worn for too long, the one Jung called the persona. And this is the second habit that can change your entire life. Removing that mask. Here is something few people realize. Most of the choices we have made in life were not truly ours, but shaped by the thought, what will others think? From the way we smile, speak in a group, to the things we post on social media, even the career we pursue. Much of it is decided not by the soul, but by the mask we believe society wants to see. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, a version built to survive in the world. But if worn too long, we forget where the mask ends and where we begin. Removing the mask is not rebellion. It does not mean living recklessly, speaking impulsively, or disregarding others' feelings. Removing the persona is learning to live authentically, meaning your words, actions, and emotions begin to move in the same direction. What you express is no longer what others expect, but what resonates with the inner truth. When you remove the mask, your energy slowly returns to the self, the mature psychological center in Jung's model. And it is then that your identity becomes clearer than ever. But why are so many people afraid to put it down? Because the mask feels safe. With it, you are accepted, less vulnerable, less likely to be rejected. But the painful truth is, you are accepted not because of you, but because of the role you play. And nothing exhausts the soul more than living in a body you do not belong to. I once witnessed the story of a woman I met during a meditation retreat. She was the kind of person everyone thought was extroverted, funny, always lifting the group's energy. But on the third evening, during a silent practice, she burst into tears. She shared that for many years she wore the mask of the cheerful one because she believed that if she didn't bring laughter, she would lose her value in people's eyes. But that mask drained her. She said, "No one really knows how sad I am. I just smile to get through it." And the moment she dared to say that, the first time in years, was when people looked at her with the gentlest eyes. It was when she became real that a connection began. To understand persona more deeply, imagine an actor on a stage. Under the spotlight, they laugh, cry, and rage according to the script. The audience applauds with excitement, but when the curtain closes, The actor steps off the stage and stands alone in a silent room. No cheering, no bright lights, only exhaustion and the question, who am I without this role? Life is the same. The world will always love your role, but only you know how you feel when you step out of it. A literary example that adds depth is Jane Eyre from the novel of the same name. Jane is not beautiful, lacks status, lacks privilege, but what makes her one of the most beloved female characters in English literature is her absolute honesty with her own essence. She does not try to become a more lovable version, does not soften herself to be loved, and does not reshape herself to fit society's expectations. The most pivotal moment is when Jane leaves Rochester, the man she loves deeply. That decision did not come from avoidance, but from loyalty to her core values. She knew that if she stayed, she would betray her morality, dignity, and authentic self. Her departure was the removal of the final mask, refusing to live as a character in someone else's story. And that difficult choice brought her true happiness, not happiness built on illusions, roles, or compromises, but the kind of happiness that can only be found when a soul dares to live as itself. Removing the mask is not a single act, but a habit of speaking more honestly, living more truthfully, performing less, trying less to be good all the time, trying less to please everyone. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The greatest privilege in life is not success, being loved, or being praised. It is becoming yourself. But that privilege belongs only to those willing to pay the price. The courage to be real, to be honest, to show up as an imperfect but genuine human being. Sometimes the journey of removing the persona begins with very small things. Saying, "I'm tired, I need rest." Saying, "I don't like that." Saying, "I'm sad." Saying, "This does not align with my values." Or simply laughing when you're happy and staying silent when you're not, without forcing yourself to appear proper. Each time you do that, one layer of the mask falls away, and the self becomes a little freer. Authenticity does not make you loved by everyone. It makes you loved truly by the right ones. Jung believed that when you live truthfully, those who belong to you will recognize you without you needing to prove anything. And that is why removing the persona does not make you more lonely. It simply isolates you from connections that were never aligned with your soul in the first place. At a deeper level, removing the mask allows you to hear your soul. You begin to know what truly makes you happy, what truly hurts you, what makes you feel alive, and what quietly kills your spirit. You begin to distinguish between what you genuinely like and what you have been taught to like. And that is the freedom Jung considered the true psychological maturity. Freedom from identification with the collective. If you are on this journey, do not rush. Removing the mask is not something done overnight. It is a habit, little by little, layer by layer. You do not need to become the truest version of yourself right now. You only need to be a bit more honest today than you were yesterday. Every small step is a message to your soul. I am ready to return. And as you become more authentic, you will notice something strange. Life becomes easier. You no longer need to remember what I said to fit in, how I should act so no one misunderstands, how I should appear to be loved. You simply live, simply be. And that simplicity is what makes you powerful. If you feel the weight of the mask you've worn for too long, consider this a gentle reminder from Jung. You do not need to be perfect. to be loved. You just need to be real, to be free. And before moving to the next habit, whisper this very small yet powerful sentence. Today, I will live a little more honestly. And if you have ever experienced the feeling of wearing a mask for so long that you forgot who you are, or if you are now in a moment of transition, learning to be honest with yourself little by little, share that story in the comments. It could be just one line, one moment, one tiny realization, but who knows? Your experience may become the mirror that helps someone else recognize their true self. Because as Jung believed, when one soul dares to live authentically, it always awakens another. Number 3. The habit of setting firm boundaries, protecting your energy without guilt. There comes a moment in life when you look back at all your relationships and suddenly realize there are places where you always smile even when you're exhausted inside. There are people to whom you always say sure, even when your heart wants to say no. And there are situations where you constantly force yourself to be the most pleasant version of who you are, just so others feel comfortable. And you ask yourself, why am I always drained? Why do others so easily cross my boundaries? Why do I feel my energy slipping away without knowing how it happens? Carl Jung believed that one of the first signs of psychological maturity is when you begin asking that question. Because only when you see where your energy is leaking can you step into the habit that can transform the way you live, love, work, and protect your soul. The habit of setting firm boundaries. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And to accept yourself, you need space to hear yourself. Boundaries are the door that keeps that space from being intruded upon by others. But most of us grow up believing that setting boundaries is selfish, that saying no is rude, that protecting your peace is hurting others, that kindness means always being available. So we trade everything so others can breathe easier, even when we ourselves can barely breathe." The truth is, boundaries are not selfish. Boundaries are how you keep your soul safe in the process of individuation, the journey of becoming yourself. No one can do this for you but you. A viewer of the channel named Linda once shared that she was always the one people leaned on. Friends came at midnight to unload their sadness. Co-workers gave her the tasks they didn't want to do. Family members asked her to handle every large and small problem. Everyone said she was thoughtful, gentle, dependable. But behind those compliments was a heavy truth. She was exhausted. She cried in silence. She felt drained bit by bit. She had lived so long as the one who must always be ready that she forgot where her true feelings even were. In a Jungian therapy exercise, Linda was asked to imagine her life if she continued this way for 10 more years. And what broke her was not the people around her, but the image of herself completely disappearing, like a fading shadow as the light of her soul was buried under obligations, expectations, and the mask of the kind one. A few days later, she tried setting one very small boundary, declining to listen to a close friend's emotional venting when she herself was exhausted. The thing she feared, anger, distance, blame, did not happen. Her friend simply paused and said they understood. And in that moment, she realized what Jung had pointed out long ago. The world does not collapse when you say no. Only the fear inside you dissolves. Firm boundaries are a habit very few people have, not because they don't understand, but because they are afraid. Afraid of being misunderstood. afraid of being disliked, afraid of being seen as cold, afraid of losing someone's affection. But the truth is, if a relationship falls apart simply because you set a boundary, it was never meant for you anyway. Boundaries do not ruin the right relationships. They only reveal the wrong ones. Imagine someone without boundaries as a house without doors. Anyone can walk in, stay as long as they want, and track mud wherever they please. You can't blame them, because you never closed the door. Meanwhile, someone with boundaries is not someone hiding behind stone walls. They simply know when to close the door, when to open it, and whom to invite into their sacred space. Boundaries do not create distance. Boundaries create clarity. From a neuroscience perspective, not setting boundaries keeps your nervous system in a state of continuous low-grade stress, a silent tension you don't even notice. When you are always saying yes just to get it over with, your sympathetic nervous system stays activated, cortisol rises, leaving your body tired, irritable, unable to sleep well, and less able to concentrate. But when you set boundaries, the parasympathetic system is activated. The body returns to a rest and restore state. You breathe deeper, your heart slows down, your energy stabilizes. Boundaries do not just heal emotions. They are a biological mechanism that keeps you alive. Firm boundaries are not about shouting no at the world. Firm boundaries are about daring to speak the smallest truth about your feelings. Saying, I cannot do this today. I need rest. I'm not comfortable with that. This is beyond my capacity. Let me think about it. Or simply, I decline. Each time you speak the truth, a layer of mental fog dissolves. You begin to see what is truly yours and what is someone else's. What is your real feeling and what is a feeling you unconsciously carried for others. Setting boundaries does not make you a bad person. It makes you a real person. And real people are always stronger than pleasant ones. Many people fear setting boundaries because they fear losing love. But real love never requires you to drain yourself to be worthy. Only those who love your mask will leave when you set boundaries. Those who love your essence will respect them, and may even love you more for having the courage to protect yourself. Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but grows in size." The more you allow others to cross your boundaries, the bigger the exhaustion becomes. But when you dare to speak the truth, everything begins to fall back into its rightful place. The habit of setting boundaries is not a single action. It is a soul habit that must be practiced daily, with gentleness, consistency, and honesty. You do not need to become ideal overnight. You only need one small boundary today. Turning off your phone for 5 minutes to breathe, declining something you do not want to do, or pausing long enough to listen to the discomfort before automatically saying yes. Every small boundary is an affirmation. I deserve my own space. Every small boundary you set is an affirmation. I deserve my own space. And when you practice long enough, you will notice something miraculous. The right people begin to appear. Not because you are trying to please them, but because you carry the frequency of someone who respects themselves. You do not need to try. You do not need to appear likable. You do not need to carry the world on your shoulders. You only need to stand firm in your own circle of energy, and the right world will come to you. Boundaries do not just protect you. Boundaries shape you. Boundaries make you strong in the exact way Jung described. Steady, quiet, and no longer easily invaded in your inner space. And that steadiness is one of the things that can transform your entire life, exactly in the spirit of the habits Jung left for the world. Number 4. The habit of nurturing solitude, the sacred space of the soul. And once you've learned to protect your boundaries to keep your energy intact, a different inner doorway begins to open. You no longer cling to noise the way you used to, no longer chase conversations just to fill the emptiness. Instead, you begin to crave silence, a kind of primal stillness that you once feared. This is the habit of nurturing solitude, the sacred space of the soul that Carl Jung described, a place where, if a person cannot endure, they will always use others to cover the emptiness within, instead of facing their true essence. Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And it is in that stillness that awakening begins. There are moments in life when you feel as if you are standing in a room full of light, yet inside you it feels strangely dark. Conversations become dull, gatherings exhaust you more than they delight you. Old inspirations no longer stir your heart. You look around and realize that even while surrounded by people, you can still hear a deep silence within. That silence feels like an invitation. Come home to yourself. But most of us fear stepping through that door, because inside it there is no laughter to distract us, no work to keep us busy, no one to lean on. Only ourselves, and the parts we've never dared to face. Jung believed that if someone cannot endure solitude, they will use others as a mirror to reflect their emptiness. But if someone knows how to be alone, they will begin to hear what the noisy world can never let them hear. The voice of the self. Intuition rises in silence. Unconscious fragments surface. Hidden patterns reveal themselves. Without solitude, you live forever in reactive mode. With solitude, you finally hear what your soul has been wanting to tell you. I once knew a woman who, after ending a long-term relationship, felt as if life had been stripped of all sound. No more nightly messages, no more "have you eaten yet?" No more shared plans to lean on. At first, she tried to fill the silence with gatherings, with work, with social media. But the more she ran, the more exhausted she became. One evening, after a long day of pretending to be fine, she turned off the lights, sat alone in her room, and felt the silence drape over her like a heavy blanket. She thought she would collapse, but when she stopped resisting, something unexpected happened. The silence became warm. She heard her own breathing. She heard her sadness, not as an enemy, but as a part of her that had long gone unheard. She said, "I realized I didn't need anyone to fill this space. I only needed to stop abandoning myself." After that, she spent 15 minutes each day just sitting quietly. And that small habit changed every choice, every decision, every feeling she had about herself. That is stepping into the sacred space Jung spoke of, the space where the true self gets to speak. What's interesting is this. History has seen countless individuals reach genius-level creativity because they chose solitude during the most important phases of their lives. One striking example is Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple. Before Apple became legendary, Wozniak spent months alone in a small room at his parents' house, programming, tinkering, redrawing circuit boards again and again. He didn't socialize, didn't seek validation, didn't boast about his abilities. Wozniak once said, "Most of the great things I created came from being alone." Without those years of solitude, The world might never have had the first personal computer small enough to sit on a home desk, the invention that began the era of global technological personalization. His story proves that solitude is not escape. It is where intuition and creativity become strongest. Yet most people run from solitude because they fear what will surface without noise. They fear emptiness. They fear truth. They fear hearing a calling they have long ignored. They fear realizing that they have been living too far from their true self. But Jung was clear. A person who cannot endure being alone will use others to escape from themselves. And the truth is, you cannot meet the self if you are always running outside. A truly mature person is someone who can sit alone with their thoughts without feeling lonely. They feel light when they close the door to the world and open the door to their mind. They cherish each minute of silence as a ritual. They understand that stillness is not an empty void. It is the soil where the soul takes root. Imagine yourself as a garden. If no one tends to it, if you leave the gate open for anyone to walk through, trample, or leave chaos behind, the garden will deplete. But when you dedicate time each day to tidy it, remove weeds, water it, and let the plants breathe, the garden begins to thrive. Solitude is the time you close the gate to tend to the inner garden, not to isolate, but to regenerate. One day, you will realize that the moments you spend alone are the moments you feel fullest. You write a few lines in your journal and suddenly feel lighter. You walk under the sunset and realize it has been a long time since you last looked at the sky. You sit still for 5 minutes in the morning without touching your phone, and that changes your whole day. These small habits are rituals of the self, where the soul breathes, heals, and expands. Solitude does not disconnect you from the world. It connects you deeper to yourself, and when you are deeply connected to your inner essence, every other connection naturally becomes healthier, clearer, and more beautiful. You no longer cling out of fear, no longer seek someone to fill your emptiness, no longer use others as emotional crutches. You love because you are whole, not because you are lacking. This is the form of inner sovereignty Jung saw as a turning point in psychological development, when a person stops searching for salvation outside and begins finding strength in their own stillness. And then one day, when you look back, you'll see that the silence you once feared was actually the greatest gift life ever offered you. It brought you closer to your soul, taught you to hear the calling you once ignored, helped you see what the eyes alone could never see. Solitude doesn't take anything from you. It removes only the noise that kept you from hearing yourself. And when you practice this habit long enough, you will understand why Carl Jung believed that inward-facing habits are the ones with the power to truly transform a life. Number 5. The habit of entering your inner darkness, daring to face your own shadow. But to go deeper inward, as the previous habit opened for you, have you ever wondered, what will happen if you dare to look straight into the deepest part, the one you most want to avoid? Because after learning to observe yourself, set boundaries, be alone, and hold stillness, you eventually reach a pivotal point in the Jungian journey that no one can skip. You must face the shadow, your own darkness. No one matures through light alone. You mature when you dare to enter the darkest place within yourself, where everything you deny, suppress, hide, or pretend does not exist. Yet what you refuse to see is exactly what controls you the most. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that is why the habit of entering your inner darkness can transform a person more profoundly than you can imagine. Shadow is not as frightening as you think. It is simply the part of yourself you were never taught to love. When you get unreasonably angry at someone, when you react intensely to a small comment, when you feel jealous of someone's success, when you feel ashamed of your own emotions, that is your shadow speaking. Not to sabotage you, but to inform you that a part of your soul has been forgotten. Every strong feeling is a signal, and every signal carries a piece of your soul wanting to be seen. When you treat it like an enemy, it will continue pulling you into cycles of unconscious reaction. But when you treat it as a messenger, a doorway opens, the doorway leading you back to your true self. I once heard a woman share in a depth psychology workshop. She was the kind of person everyone praised as gentle, easygoing, always cheerful. But behind that softness was anger suppressed for years. When her husband dismissed her feelings, she said nothing. When co-workers dumped tasks on her, she smiled and agreed. When her family ignored her needs, she stayed silent. She said something I will never forget. "I don't know what anger feels like. I fear anger because I was taught that girls who get angry are disrespectful." But at the moment she said this, tears began to fall. Not because she was weak, but because her shadow, the anger buried at the bottom of her unconscious, was finally seen. After that day, she started a small habit, writing about her anger every night, without judgment, without suppression. 3 months later, she said, "I didn't become more hot-tempered, I became more honest." That is the power of facing the shadow. It does not make you lose control, it restores your control. To understand the shadow, imagine you are standing in front of a mirror in a room with only one small light bulb. The bulb shines in front of you, showing your face clearly. But behind you, where the light does not reach, there is always a shadow. The more you turn around to see it, the more it clings to you. The more you try to chase it away, the more it follows your every step. But if you move the light, just shift the bulb to another angle, the shadow immediately appears. It does not disappear, but it becomes clear. The shadow works exactly like that. It never disappears on its own. It only becomes harmless when you dare to look at it. There is a truth Jung emphasized. Every conflict in life is a reflection of an internal conflict. You are not angry at others because they are wrong. You are angry because they touched a part of you that you have never faced. You are not jealous because they are better. You are jealous because they live a part of you that you have not dared to live. You are not hurt by someone's words because they are cruel. You are hurt because the words hit an old wound stored in your shadow. When you understand this, your life changes. Because at that point, instead of reacting, you begin observing. Instead of blaming, you begin reflecting. Instead of running from pain, you step into it to see what it wants to teach you. Facing the shadow is the habit that breaks unconscious patterns. Because the unconscious always repeats. It repeats old relationships, old emotions, old wounds, not because you don't deserve better, but because the unconscious wants you to heal what has not been seen, and you will repeat until you learn the lesson. At a deeper level, facing your shadow is the first step of individuation, the journey of becoming a whole person. Because a human being is not defined only by their light, but by the union of their light and darkness. Without darkness, light has no shape. Without darkness, you cannot know which part of you needs to be seen. And when you dare to enter your inner darkness, something miraculous happens. You no longer fear others seeing your vulnerabilities. You no longer need to wear masks to appear perfect. You no longer react violently to criticism, because you have seen yourself, faced yourself, moved through yourself. No one has the power to shake you the way they used to. From a neuroscience perspective, when you dare to face a strong emotion instead of avoiding it, you activate the prefrontal cortex, the center of logic and decision-making. This reduces activity in the amygdala, the center of instinctive reactions. Meaning, when you face the shadow, you are training your brain to shift from reaction to awareness. You become slower, deeper, steadier. You no longer snap instantly when triggered. You become the observer, and that is true strength. Remember this always. The shadow is not the bad part of you. It is simply the part you have not yet dared to see. It holds your power, your truth, your creativity, your instincts, your sensitivity, all the things you once feared. The shadow is where the soul stores its most beautiful forgotten pieces. And only when you step into the darkness will you find the missing fragments that help you become whole. And from that moment, your life begins to change in unexpected ways. You know why you're angry. You know what hurts you. You know why you react so strongly to small things. You know why you repeat old patterns in relationships. You know why you fear abandonment, fear failure, fear being seen. Nothing is mysterious anymore. Everything becomes clear, as if you have just turned on a light in a room that was dark for many years. If one day you feel something rising inside you, anger, fear, jealousy, insecurity, don't rush to push it away. Tell yourself, this is a signal. Because in the moment you dare to look at that signal, you have taken a huge step into the journey Carl Jung called the journey back to yourself. If you believe this world needs more people who dare to face their own darkness, to become more honest, more compassionate, and less hurtful toward one another, please like the video to help spread the message. Every like is not just support for the channel, but a gentle reminder that courage is not the absence of darkness, but the willingness to walk into it. And through people like you, people who dare to look deeply within, the world begins to heal silently but powerfully. Number 6. The habit of healing complexes, transforming the emotional complexes. There are moments when you do not understand why a single careless sentence, a glance, or even a silence can send your mind spiraling down as if falling into an invisible abyss. You know your reaction is too much, but you cannot stop it. You do not understand why you avoid a relationship even though you deeply want to love, why you struggle at work despite trying your best, why just one sign of coldness makes your heart immediately curl up like an abandoned child. Carl Jung called these moments the activation of complexes, the emotional knots of the unconscious. They are not your bad traits or weaknesses, but frozen fragments of past experiences, and every time they are touched, they instantly revive, pulling you back into old roles, old feelings, old fears. A complex is not a problem of the present. It is an old wound reliving itself in the present. The father wound, the mother wound, the fear of abandonment, the longing for validation, the feeling of unworthiness. All function like unconscious seeds buried deep in the psyche. and with the slightest trigger, they spring up with more force than you expect. Jung said that a complex does not destroy you. It only wants you to see what has been buried for too long. And to dissolve a complex, you do not need to fight it. You need to look at it. Because in Jung's analytical psychology, to see is to heal. The simplest image for a complex is a room inside the house of your soul that has been locked for many years. Outside, you decorate the living room, polish the bedroom, tidy the kitchen, those socially accepted parts, the parts belonging to the persona. But there is one room you never open because you fear the light will expose the things that hurt you. The moment you were scolded, the time you were left behind, the moment you were compared, the feeling of not being good enough. That room is dark, cluttered, dusty, and just the slightest touch on its door sends a heavy wave rushing out, making you feel as though the whole house is shaking. But the truth is, the door does not want to destroy you. It only wants to be opened. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When you refuse to look into the complex, you repeat the same old patterns as if fate has been predetermined. You love but fear abandonment. You are talented but fear judgment. You are kind but fear rejection. Every reaction feels like something inevitable, but in reality, it is not destiny. It is the unconscious steering the wheel for you. As you become familiar with healing complexes, you begin to see that every overwhelming emotion is a message from an old version of yourself. A child within saying, "I am still here, I was hurt, and I want to be heard." That is why the sixth habit is not destroying the complex, but healing it by diffusing the unconscious trigger so that old emotions no longer control you as before. I always think of the figure of Chiron in Greek mythology when speaking about complexes. Chiron was a different kind of centaur, gentle, wise, a teacher of heroes and a healer of others. But in an accident, he was struck by a poisoned arrow from Heracles. Because he was immortal, he could not die, but the wound never healed. Chiron lived constantly in pain, a paradox that looked like a curse. But from Jung's perspective, it is the perfect symbol of the complex, a wound that cannot be rewound in time, but can be transformed. Forced to live with his pain, Chiron devoted himself to studying medicine, understanding the body, the soul, remedies, and learning how to soothe others' pain. Because of that wound, he became the greatest healer. The wound did not disappear, but it ceased to be a punishment. It became the doorway to wisdom and compassion. Our complexes are the same. You cannot pretend they never happened, but when you dare look at them, understand them, and walk with them, the pain begins to change shape. It stops dragging you downward and becomes a gift that makes you gentler with yourself, deeper with others, and more authentic on your own journey. When you heal a complex, what you are truly doing is not erasing the painful memory, but placing the memory back where it belongs. Instead of letting it stand in the middle of the road like a deep hole that constantly makes you fall, you move it to the side, where it still exists, but no longer obstructs you. A complex does not disappear. It simply stops taking control. There is an interesting fact. Complexes are usually formed in early childhood, a time when we had no ability to analyze or protect ourselves. A child abandoned thinks, "It must be because I am not worthy." A child constantly compared thinks, "My value must be proven." A child raised with violent parents thinks, love comes with fear. Those conclusions are stored in the unconscious like hidden programs, and when we grow up, we react not as adults, but as the children we once were. That is why healing a complex is not about forcing yourself to control your emotions, but learning to talk to that inner child. Each time you are triggered, instead of blaming yourself, "I'm so weak," try saying, "It's okay. This is just an old memory. I am safe. You don't have to endure this anymore." In that moment, you are not only soothing your emotions, you are soothing your past. Neurologically, each complex is a network linking memory, emotion, and biological response. When triggered, the brain instantly activates the sympathetic nervous system. Heart rate increases, cortisol rises, the body prepares to fight or flee. But when you look directly at the emotion, instead of being swept away by it, you activate the parasympathetic system, the center of peace. You turn fear from a threat into a message. And a message, once understood, no longer dominates you. Healing a complex is not erasing the past, but growing beyond it. When you are strong enough not to be pulled back into old roles, you become the guide of your own mind, not the unconscious guiding you. A person beginning to heal a complex is not someone who is no longer hurt, but someone who stands beside their pain instead of letting it control them. They see the signals within themselves, see the parts longing to be loved, heard, freed. They no longer run away from their inner child. They hold its hand, just as Jung believed every transformation begins with facing rather than avoiding. And strangely, when you begin to dialogue with the complex, instead of suppressing or fearing it, you will find yourself changing without effort. You no longer overreact to minor situations. You no longer fear abandonment when someone steps back. You no longer shrink when someone is disappointed. Because now, you no longer carry your child's wound into the present. You live in the present as an adult, acting not from old fear, but from inner clarity. That is the power of the habit of healing complexes, one of the deepest habits that can transform your life, in the true spirit of Carl Jung. Returning to the unconscious, its right to be liberated, so you no longer live as a version driven by the past, but as yourself, more mature, more aware, and freer each day. Number 7. The story of Marina and the shadow of a past that never had a name. And when you begin to see your complex as a door that needs to be opened rather than a destroyer, you will realize one thing. Healing a complex does not only change how you react, but also how you love, how you choose people, and how you move through the world. Because once the unconscious no longer drives you, you begin to see more clearly the patterns you once believed were destiny. This leads us to the most vivid proof of this habit, the story of Marina. Marina, 34, is the type of woman others assume has a complete life. She has a job in the creative industry with stable income, is always invited to major projects, respected by colleagues, and admired by friends as a model independent woman. In her career, she walks a straight, impressive path. But in love, she is a completely different picture. Failure after failure. This contrast tormented her for years. Unconsciously, Marina was always drawn to the same type of man. Distant, unpredictable, cold, standing just out of reach. Men who did not offer certainty, did not give her the feeling of being chosen, but who made her chase them until exhaustion. Every relationship began with excitement and ended in silence. They disappeared, drifted away, or suddenly turned cold without explanation. And every time, Marina turned inward and asked, "What did I do wrong? Am I not interesting enough? Not attractive enough?" In long nights, burying herself in work to forget the feeling of abandonment, she never realized that the answer lay deeper in her unconscious. Not until she encountered Jungian psychology did everything become clear. She read about complexes, about unconscious patterns formed in childhood and activated whenever an old wound is touched. She paused for a long time at the concept of the father wound. Marina grew up in a family where her father was present in a distant way. He loved her, but in a quiet, faraway style. He spoke little, rarely expressed emotion, and seemed to stand outside his own family's world. When Marina was happy, he only nodded. When she was sad, he was so silent, she did not know where to seek comfort. When he was disappointed, he did not scold, but his indifference made her feel like she disappeared. Many children raised in such an atmosphere come to one conclusion: it must be because I am not good enough. That is how complexes work. They make you repeat the wound in hopes of healing it. But when the unconscious leads, you only repeat pain. You never escape it. As Jung said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. These realizations came slowly but powerfully enough for Marina to pause. She began observing herself like an explorer, walking into the terrain of her soul. That was when a new habit formed, the habit of healing her complex the Jungian way. Every evening, Marina played soft music, placed a notebook in front of her, and wrote down her emotions. Not to analyze or justify, only to name them. "Today I felt anxious," when he replied slowly, "because silence scares me. I fear I am not enough." Each time she wrote this, her hands trembled. But she kept writing. She also practiced sitting with painful memories instead of running from them. Sometimes, Marina closed her eyes and returned to her 8-year-old self. Her father sitting in front of the TV, silent, while she shared a new song she had learned. When she finished, he only said, To an adult, that is a moment of indifference. To a child, it is an entire disappearance. In those self-reflective sessions, Marina realized she had lived her whole life with the wrong conclusion of a child. But the truth was her father, too, carried his own wounds. He did not know how to express love. He did not intend to hurt her. He simply did not know another way. Slowly, Marina practiced a new habit, naming her emotions accurately. When someone was cold, she no longer said, "He's driving me crazy." She wrote, "I feel scared." When she felt anxious in love, she no longer thought, "Maybe I'm loving the wrong person." She wrote, "The child inside me is scared of abandonment." Each time she named it precisely, the power of the complex weakened a little. But the real turning point came in one very ordinary moment. One Sunday afternoon, Marina sat in her usual cafe, staring at her phone with a heavy heart. The man she was seeing had read but not replied for 2 days. Before, she would have panicked, checked her phone constantly, imagined he was leaving her, and blamed herself. But this time, something inside her stopped. There was no chaos, but a question rising sharply. Am I loving as my present self, or as my old wound? That question made Marina exhale as if released. She put down her phone. In that moment, she did not think about the man. She thought about herself. about the 8-year-old girl who once begged for her father's attention. She suddenly realized that for years, she had never loved as an adult. She loved as a child, pleading to be seen. It was the moment that changed the entire direction of her life. In the days that followed, Marina continued practicing small but profound habits: emotional journaling, facing old memories, naming every rising feeling. Gradually, she became more spacious with herself, less judgmental, and no longer panicked over small things. The man kept his distance, but this time, she did not chase. Not because she stopped caring, but because she realized what she had been chasing all along was not him. It was the validation she had never received from her father. One morning, Marina woke with clarity. "I deserve a love that comes from the present, not from old wounds." She sent him a gentle goodbye. When she closed that conversation, she felt as if she had closed a chapter. For the first time, Marina stepped out of her old pattern, not through force, but because she could finally see the truth. From then on, her life changed quietly, but profoundly. She began choosing kinder, more stable people. She was no longer attracted to distance, no longer saw coldness as an exciting challenge, no longer found unpredictability appealing. Her complex did not disappear, it simply softened, no longer pulling her into the same loops. Marina often says, "Healing the complex didn't help me find the right person. It helped me become the right person who chooses her own life." Her story is living proof that the habit of healing the complex not only unties an unconscious knot, but opens a new chapter of living, where you love with maturity, act from clarity, and live with the freedom Carl Jung wanted humans to reach. Because once you truly see yourself, you no longer need someone else to fill the parts you never dared to face. You do not love from wounds, you love from your real self. Number 8. The habit of learning how to slow down. If healing the complex is the previous habit that helps you return to the unconscious, then learning how to slow down will help you begin to guide it. And the first thing Jung wants you to see is this: urgency never comes from the present. It always comes from an unnamed fear. When you rush, you are not truly living. You are running away from something. There are phases when you feel like your entire life is being pushed into fast forward, thoughts piling up, emotions swelling, everything in front of you becoming blurry. You react faster than you choose. You answer before you hear what you are actually saying. You agree before knowing whether you truly want to. You love, you fear, you try, you hustle. All at a pace your mind cannot digest. And then one day, you sit down and ask, why do I always feel like time is chasing me? Jung believed the answer lies in a simple but piercing truth. People rush the most when they are afraid to stop and listen to themselves. Urgency is not a personality trait. It is a signal of an unseen unconscious. Slowing down is not doing less. It is reclaiming the power of choice. When you slow down, you begin to hear clearly what inside you is pushing, what is fearing, what is desiring, and what is avoiding. Slowing down is returning to the seat of the driver. Speed is instinct. Slowness is consciousness. I remember a girl named Lila, working in the communications industry, a place where everything runs on speed. She told me that despite many achievements, she always felt as if she were out of breath in her own life. Each day was a chase. Chasing emails, chasing deadlines, chasing praise, chasing the feeling of, I'm doing well. But the more she chased, the emptier she felt. One day, After receiving an unreasonable criticism from her boss, Lila burst into tears right at the elevator door, not because of the criticism, but because she realized she had not taken a full breath in. 5 years. In our conversation that day, she asked, "How do I stop living like I'm running away from myself?" And the answer did not begin with big strategies, but with something very small. She had to learn how to slow down, not to do less, but to see more clearly. When Lila began practicing slowing down, everything changed in subtle ways. She set an alarm 3 times a day, just to remind herself to breathe deeply for 1 minute. When entering the office, she paused for 5 seconds at the door to feel her body. When receiving a message that made her anxious, instead of responding immediately, she placed her hand over her heart and asked, "Is this reaction coming from the present or from fear?" Only 3 weeks later, she said, "I'm no longer running, I'm living again." The strange part was that her productivity even increased, not because she worked faster, but because she worked with awareness. There is a story I find perfect for this habit. A young monk went to a Zen master and said, "Master, my mind is always full of noise. I want to reach enlightenment as fast as possible. Please teach me the quickest method." The master looked at him, smiled, and handed him a cup of tea. When pouring, he intentionally kept pouring until the cup overflowed. The young monk panicked. "Master, it's overflowing." The Zen master calmly replied, "Just like your mind, it is too full to learn anything more. You want enlightenment fast, but it is the very speed that prevents you." Silence fell before the master added, "To truly understand life, you must first slow down enough to see what is happening inside you." Slowness is not a skill. It is a state of consciousness. Jung aligned with that spirit. He believed that humans only become conscious when they slow down enough to observe their inner movements. When the unconscious is unseen, it will drive you. When observed, it becomes your ally. In reality, urgency has a clear structure in the nervous system. When stressed, the body activates the sympathetic system, cortisol rises, heartbeat increases, breathing becomes shallow, causing you to react rather than choose. But when you slow down, through breathing, awareness, pausing, the parasympathetic system activates, returning the body to safety. Then, the prefrontal cortex, the center of judgment, logic, clarity, can truly function. You are no longer pulled by survival instinct. You begin to access creativity. Therefore, slowing down is the biological foundation of awakening. There are moments when slowing down is the hardest thing, especially when you are used to using speed to hide emptiness. You do more to avoid feeling inadequate. You speak fast to avoid feeling hurt. You love quickly to avoid the fear of abandonment. You say yes to everything to avoid guilt. But one day, you realize that the faster you run, the bigger the fear becomes. And what you need is not to run faster, but to stop long enough to see where you are running to. Jung believed that the moment people truly change is not when they try to do more, but when they stop and look at their motives. Because the root of urgency is always fear. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of being left behind. Fear of not being loved. Fear of facing oneself. When you slow down, you are not just adjusting your pace. You are doing what Jung called separating the ego from instinctive reaction. You are no longer automated by old memories. You begin to have space to choose. Imagine you are walking on a narrow bridge. If you run, you see nothing except the fear of falling. But when you walk slowly, you begin to see the scenery, the color of the sky, the light on the water. Slowing down does not make you weak. Slowing down makes you awake. And that awakening is the true source of strength. There is a passage in the Bible saying that Jesus often withdrew to lonely places to pray. Many think of it as separation, but on a deeper level, it is slowing down. Even the one considered to be full of power needed moments of stillness to return to his essence before bringing his light into the world. A soul that does not know how to slow down cannot bring any clarity into life. When you learn this habit, life ceases to be a race. It becomes an encounter with yourself. You are no longer pulled by others' speed, by society's expectations, by the world's noise. You walk with your own rhythm, slow, deep, intentional, and that rhythm makes you different. People sense your peace before you even speak. They hear steadiness in the way you breathe, the way you look, the way you choose. Because slowing down is not just a behavior, it is an energy. One day, you will realize that all the decisions that changed your life, leaving a toxic place, choosing a kind person, saying no to an unsuitable opportunity, forgiving someone, or forgiving yourself, came from moments when you slowed down. Not from panic, not from urgency, but from the clarity of a conscious mind. And if you are going through a phase where everything inside you urges you to go faster, consider this a reminder. That is not your soul speaking. That is the wound speaking. The soul can only speak when you are slow enough. So we have passed over half the journey, and I am truly grateful for your meaningful presence. Before continuing, pause for a breath, inhale deeply, and listen to your own heart. If these words resonate with you, if you see glimpses of yourself in these reflections, try writing one word in the comments: slow. Sometimes, a single gentle reminder is enough to plant a seed of change in your mind, and who knows, it might become a small light, helping someone lost find their way back to themselves. Number 9. The habit of letting go of control. Surrender to the self. Once you have learned how to slow down, you will notice something subtle that Jung always emphasized. The stiller you become, the more clearly you see how much you have been trying to control your life. There will likely be a moment in your life when you ask yourself, what in this life is truly in my hands, and what has never belonged to me? Jung believed this is the turning point because the moment you begin healing on the inside, the ego, which is used to controlling everything to feel safe, will start to panic. It wants certainty, wants to know the outcome, wants to hold the future in its hands. But it is at that exact moment that the journey of growth touches upon a habit Jung considered the core of transformation. Learning how to let go. Not letting go of everything, but letting go of the control that has been tightening around your soul. An image that always appears most clearly when speaking about this habit is the image of a river. Many people swim against the current, try to cling to branches, try to fight against the natural flow of life simply because they believe, if they do not control things, everything will collapse. But Jung's river is different. It does not sweep you away blindly. It is the flow of the unconscious, of intuition, of synchronicities, the subtle signals sent by the self. When you let go, you are not carried away aimlessly. You are guided. Just like the lyric in the song, "Let It Be" by the Beatles. And when the broken-hearted people living in the world agree, there will be an answer. Let it be. Letting go is not giving up, but agreeing to let the answer appear at its right time. I once heard a story about a man working in business who spent 3 consecutive years desperately trying to salvage a project he believed must succeed. He did everything, calculated, pushed himself, chased every small opportunity, stayed up many nights worrying. He controlled every tiny detail, from clients, partners, to employees. But the more he tried, the more chaotic everything became. One day, after a major argument with his associate, he sat alone in a cafe and realized he had not listened to himself for a long time. He had only listened to fear of failure, fear of losing reputation, fear of others thinking he was not good enough. That day, he did something that surprised even himself. He let go of the project, not quitting his career, but letting go of the expectation that it must succeed right now. During the next 3 months, he spent time with himself, walking every morning, sitting silently for 20 minutes a day, writing down what he truly wanted. He said, "For the first time in many years, I felt like I was no longer fighting with life." 6 months later, he met a new business partner. Not by actively searching, but through a completely unexpected encounter. That new project not only succeeded, but also went in the exact direction he had wanted from the beginning. He ended the story with a very Jung-like sentence. "When I let go, I did not lose. I reclaimed myself." From a neuroscience perspective, the ability to let go of control is directly linked to the prefrontal cortex, the region that manages higher-order thinking. When you try to control everything, the amygdala, the fear center, becomes overactive, causing stress, increased heart rate, and a mind stuck in defensive mode. But when you let go, the parasympathetic nervous system activates, helping reduce cortisol and unlocking clear thinking. Letting go does not make you weaker. It makes your brain clearer, your soul lighter, and your intuition stronger. Letting go, according to Jung, is also an act of trust, not blind trust in the universe will take care of it, but trust that the deepest part of you knows the way. The self does not lead you to places that shrink you. It only leads you where your soul is ready to grow. The ego always wants to climb the highest mountain. The self wants you to stand on the mountain that truly belongs to you. If you notice the most beautiful moments in life, a love arriving at the right time, an opportunity opening up, an unexpected encounter that changes your direction, have never come from forcing. They arrive when you stop clinging, stop demanding, and your heart is calm enough to recognize what is calling you. Jung once said, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. When you let go, you meet yourself again, in a new form, brighter, freer." Letting go of control also helps release the heavy expectations placed on others. Many people suffer because they want others to love them the way they desire, respond the way they hope, heal at the pace they set. But love does not bloom when you control it. It blooms when you let others be themselves. Like planting a tree, you cannot pull it to make it grow faster. You can only tend the soil, water it, and give it time. The self understands this. The ego does not. An image I always use to describe letting go is a hand tightly gripping a handful of sand. The tighter you squeeze, the more sand slips out. But when you open your hand, the sand stays still. Letting go is when you keep your palm open, not trying to hold, not trying to chase. You allow everything to come and go in its natural rhythm. Sometimes, letting go means accepting that the person you love does not choose you. Sometimes, letting go means allowing a plan to fail because it no longer aligns with who you are. Sometimes, letting go means no longer trying to fix others. Sometimes, letting go means saying, "I do not know what will happen, but I trust I will get through it." And what Jung wants you to understand is this: letting go does not make you lose. Letting go brings you back to the self. You no longer cling anxiously to the future. You return to the present. You no longer fear losing. You realize you were never lacking. You no longer live like someone who is avoiding. You live like someone who is opening. Life rarely operates according to the ego's plan, but it always operates with order when aligned with the self. When you let go, you not only reduce suffering, you begin living true to your nature. The person of inner depth Jung described is not someone who controls a lot, but someone who knows how to step back, listen, wait, and trust. They do not force the river, they read it. If you are going through a phase where nothing seems to go according to plan, consider it not a failure, but life's invitation for you to practice this habit, the habit of letting go in the true Jungian spirit. Not letting go of dreams, but letting go of the way you are desperately trying to hold them. Not letting go of hope, but letting go of the fear making you shrink. Ask yourself, if I stop trying to control this, what will become lighter inside me? The answer may arrive in silence, on a peaceful morning, or in a moment when you unexpectedly exhale. But it will come, because the self always speaks. The question is whether you are still enough to hear it. And if you are trembling as you let go, that is completely normal. The ego fears letting go because it believes that if it releases its grip, everything will fall apart. But the truth is, you are not dropping yourself into emptiness. You are dropping yourself into a deeper layer of wisdom, where the self has been waiting for you for a very long time. And when you practice this habit every day, you will see that life not only becomes lighter, but you also become the clearest, calmest, and freest version of yourself. Number 10. The habit of turning fear into action, shadow into action. And exactly when you have learned how to let go, learned how to stand steady in the inner stillness as in the previous part, you will step into a transformative habit that Jung always considered the boundary between understanding yourself and becoming yourself, turning fear into action. If letting go brings you back to a slower and deeper rhythm of living, then action is where you let your soul step out into the world. Because Jung believed that knowledge without action is still just a beautiful shell of intellect, but only action changes the structure of the unconscious. Only action moves your life in a new direction. What many people do not realize is that fear is not a sign of weakness. It is simply energy that has not been directed. When you are afraid, the energy inside you rises, but if you do not channel it into action, it becomes procrastination, self-doubt, or nameless anxiety. But when you act, even a very small step, that energy transforms, clears a path, and changes the way your brain perceives you. Action is the strongest message you send to the unconscious. I am taking responsibility for my life. I once heard a very interesting story from a psychologist in Vienna about a student named Leo who had a strangely clear dream: to become a documentary filmmaker. He wanted to tell real human stories, but throughout 4 years of college, he could not shoot a single video longer than 3 minutes. Not because he lacked skill, not because he lacked time, but because every time he began, he was blocked by a thought. Who will watch this? What if someone criticizes it? He did not realize that those questions were the real barrier, not his ability. One day, his professor said, "If you are afraid to start a film, then make the worst film you possibly can." Leo laughed, but those words hit exactly the right spot. His fear was not about making a film, but about the pressure to make it good. The next day, he picked up his camera and recorded a short story about a flower seller on the street corner. No professional lighting, no beautiful angles, no script. Just capturing a real moment. When he finished editing the 3-minute clip, he realized something strange. He was no longer afraid. Not because the film was perfect, but because he had crossed the boundary that had kept him stuck. A year later, Leo had his first documentary screened at a small film festival. He said the thing that changed his life was not the award or recognition, but the moment he pressed record on that first day. When his hands trembled, his heart pounded, but he kept going. "I realized," he said, "that fear never disappears before action. It only disappears in action." What keeps many people stuck is not fear, but waiting for fear to go away. But Jung always emphasized that emotion is not the only signal governing life. He believed that action has the power to reshape emotion, not the other way around. You do not wait to feel confident before doing. You do it to become confident. You do not wait for doubt to vanish before starting. You start so the unconscious learns that doubt no longer has power over you. Imagine the image of a mountain you want to climb. You stand looking from the bottom, and it seems overwhelmingly tall. But when you take the first few steps, the scenery changes. The slope no longer looks like what you imagined. And when you have climbed a small section, you look back and realize an important truth. The scariest part was standing still. Turning fear into action is not reckless action, it is conscious action. It is the moment you tell yourself, "I will do this, even though my heart is racing," not to pretend to be brave, but to live true to your inner truth. It is when you take a step that is imperfect but honest, a step enough to remind you that the trembling of your body is never stronger than the calling of your soul. And in those moments, you no longer live according to the anxious warnings of the ego, but begin to act according to the self, the deepest, calmest, and most lucid center within every human being. Jung believed that humans only truly mature when they act from the self. You cannot wait until anxiety disappears before you live. You mature in the very moment you carry anxiety with you and still move forward. The important thing in this habit is not to change your entire life in one day. The important thing is the small step with great meaning. You do not need to write an entire book. You only need to write one page, the first page, the page that shifts your life. You do not need to wait until you feel fully confident. You only need to send one email you have postponed for months out of fear of rejection. You do not need a perfect workout session. You only need 10 minutes to remind your body that you are still caring for it. You do not need to be strong in every relationship. Sometimes, making one phone call to face something instead of running away is already a major victory. I have a friend who once told me that her first run in life lasted only 3 minutes. 3 minutes so short that others might consider it insignificant. But for her, it was the moment her life changed direction. Because those 3 minutes were the first time she chose action instead of waiting, chose to step beyond the limits fear had built for years. The following year, she completed her first marathon. It was not the marathon that made her strong. It was those first 3 minutes, the 3 minutes she dared to begin, that changed her. Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." This is one of the quotes that best reflects the spirit of this habit. You do not become the person you wish you could become, but the person you choose to act as in every moment. And no action is too small to matter, especially when that action is taken while you are still afraid. You cannot wait for fear to vanish before acting, because fear only dissolves while you are moving. When you begin to act, something strange always happens. Things you thought were impossible suddenly feel lighter. The limits you believed belonged to you turn out to be nothing more than products of the past. And the future opens doors you never dared to imagine. If today you feel you are standing before something that makes your heart beat faster than usual, do not wait another year, another month, or even another perfect day. Perfection is not what opens the door to your life. It is the trembling step that opens that door. Just one small step. The small step that one day you will look back on and realize. That was the moment everything began to change. Number 11. The habit of choosing an energetically aligned environment. The habit of energetic environment. What very few people realize on the journey of self-transformation is this. You are not always stuck because you lack discipline, courage, or knowledge. Often you are stuck simply because you are standing inside an energy field that does not belong to you. Carl Jung believed that humans are not only influenced by their personal unconscious, but also fused with the collective unconscious. This means the energy of the people around you affects your mind, your choices, and your pace of life far more than you think. In the wrong environment, the self is suffocated. In the right environment, the self is liberated. Not every sentence or every relationship is harmless. Some people make you open and some make you shrink. Some places expand your mind and some make your thoughts contract. And to change your life, you do not always need to try harder. Sometimes, you simply need to stand in a place where your soul can breathe. I once met a girl named Miriam in a small training class in Barcelona. She shared that for 3 years, she always felt not good enough, not skilled enough, even though everyone could see she was creative, sensitive, and intelligent. But in her friend group, people who lived in competition, comparison, and constant belittling, she was always the one they underestimated. Every time she wanted to start a business, they said, "No one cares about that idea." Every time she wanted to travel, they asked, "What are you trying to prove?" Every time she dressed better, they said, "Trying too hard?" For 3 years, Miriam thought she was weak. Only until one day, she moved cities. Not because she was too hurt, but because her heart could no longer endure the old environment. In the new city, she worked with people who were creative, relaxed, funny, and communicated in an open language, not the language of defensiveness and competition. 6 months later, Miriam created a small fashion brand. A year later, she opened her first store. When I asked, "What changed?" She replied, "Not me, the environment. I simply bloomed when I stood in the right place." Jung believed that we do not only absorb energy, but we synchronize energy according to the frequency of the group. Humans do not live separately. They merge into the emotional atmosphere of those around them. If you live among people who only complain, you will gradually become pessimistic. If you are among people who talk only about shallow things, your mind will become dull. If you live among people who fear change, you will shrink. But if you stand near people with clear frequencies, those who live with purpose, courage, and peace, your mind will reflect that. You become deeper without effort, more peaceful without struggle, more expansive without forcing yourself. Imagine you are a candle. If you place a candle in a suffocating room with little oxygen, the flame weakens and flickers, not because it cannot burn brightly, but because the environment deprives it of air. But if you place that same candle in a spacious room with gentle wind, tranquility, and natural light, the flame not only shines, but burns steadily and beautifully. Humans are the same. The inner light does not disappear. The environment simply decides whether you can sustain it. History holds countless examples showing how environment determines a person's breakthrough speed. Steve Jobs once said that if he had not lived in the creative, rebellious environment of California in the 70s, Apple would not exist as it does today. Similarly, J.K. Rowling wrote the first chapters of Harry Potter at the Elephant House Cafe, where she said the energy of the space made her imagination flow more naturally than anywhere else. Adele once shared that the period she blossomed the most was when she left toxic relationships and found a group of artists who shared her creative frequency. And from that, her most iconic albums were born. Success does not happen in random environments. It blooms where the right energy nourishes you. Carl Jung once said, "Every person has a psychic community, soul companions whose frequencies match yours, whom you may not know in real life, but instantly feel you belong to when you meet them. They do not need to try to understand you. Their presence alone changes your energy. Such people do not lift you through advice, but through their frequency of living. You feel brighter near them. You become more honest, more courageous, more creative. You become the most natural version of yourself without trying." Jung called such people containers of the psyche, safe vessels for the mind. Simply standing next to them, you feel yourself open. But the painful truth is, most people spend their entire lives in environments that do not belong to them, jobs that shrink them, friendships that make them self-doubt, families that silence their voice, and they think the problem lies within themselves. But the problem is, they are standing in the wrong place. If you feel empty, exhausted, or like you're losing yourself, do not immediately blame yourself. Ask, does this environment allow my soul to exist? If the answer is no, be honest. You are not weak. You are simply in a place not meant for you. And if you have ever stepped out of a mismatched environment, you know how powerful that feeling is. As if your breath suddenly expands. As if you reclaim parts of yourself you lost. As if the sky opens a patch of light you had never seen before. Jung believed such moments are not coincidences. They are signs that the self is awakening. He once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. On the deepest level, Jung was not only talking about relationships between two individuals, but about the frequency between you and your environment, that the human soul can only grow in spaces capable of touching, transforming, and awakening the forgotten parts within you. You cannot bloom in the desert of people who judge, compare, and control. You bloom when you stand among people who give you space, who do not rush to judge, who do not crush your vulnerability. You bloom when you stand among people who make you want to be more honest, better, more creative, not to prove anything, but to respond to their frequency. And the truth is, changing your environment is sometimes the bravest act you can do for your soul. Not because you are selfish, but because you are finally clear enough to see that where you are standing no longer helps you become yourself. If today you feel you are in the wrong frequency, the wrong group of people, wrong space, wrong rhythm, see it not as a mistake. See it as an invitation. Ask gently, where can I breathe? Who helps me open? What makes me shine? When you find the frequency that aligns with your soul, you will no longer have to struggle to grow. You will simply become yourself. And that, according to Jung, is the deepest form of transformation. And what about you? Before we move on to the next habit, I want to ask you one simple question, capable of shaking your entire journey. If your soul could freely choose the place to bloom, what would that place look like? Write it in the comments. A place, a person, a frequency, a space. Anything that feels like the right place for you. You never know how that small answer might open something inside you, and maybe awaken something in someone reading your comment. Number 12. The story of Clara and the room where energy was suffocated. And from the truth that the environment can open you or shrink you, as we touched on in the previous part, you will understand a lesson Jung always saw as the greatest blind spot in healing. The problem is not always you. Sometimes the stagnation you feel, the unexplained exhaustion, the persistent self-doubt, do not originate from your true nature, but from a collective unconscious field that is too impoverished, too heavy, and too mismatched with your soul's frequency. According to Jung, humans do not only live in a physical house, they live in a psychological atmosphere, and that atmosphere can nourish you or suffocate you to the point you no longer recognize yourself. Clara, 28, was one of the souls suffocated this way. And her story is something many people will see themselves in. Clara grew up in a family where every form of growth was considered unnecessary, every desire to learn mocked, every attempt to become deeper dismissed as nonsense. When she read psychology books, her mother said, "There you go again, making things up." When she wanted to take a creative course, her father said, "Focus on making money." When she changed her style to feel more confident, her sister scoffed, "Stop being fake." These comments did not just make her sad for a moment. They seeped into her unconscious, becoming energy codes that made her doubt every step she took. Her soul wanted to open, but the energy field around her tightened. Every time she wanted to start something new, a voice that wasn't hers whispered, "Who do you think you are?" Every time she wanted to step out of her comfort zone, another voice murmured, "You'll fail anyway." And the heartbreaking part is that Clara believed these voices were her own, when in fact, they were echoes from people who never dared to step out of their own fear. She thought these were her own thoughts. But in truth, They were the collective shadow of her family. A shadow filled with doubt, limitation, fear of change, and the deep belief that trying is pointless. Standing inside that atmosphere too long made Clara think she was weak, lazy, undisciplined, and lacking ambition. But the truth was, she was simply standing on soil where flowers could not bloom. Jung once wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents." And Clara carried not only her family's expectations, but the fears they never faced. Everything changed on a completely ordinary night, an argument over doing the dishes. But what Clara got angry about was not the dishes. She got angry because she suddenly realized that despite being 28 years old, she was still treated like a child without a voice, without the right to dream, without space to open. That night, she packed her things, called 2 college friends, and moved in with them temporarily. The new apartment was not luxurious. A small living room, a kitchen scented with tea, a balcony full of plants Matteo watered every morning, and strings of warm yellow lights Sophie hung in the living room. But Clara felt it the moment she stepped in. The air was different, wider, softer, brighter, as if her soul had been given a door it had never known existed. And for the first time, she did not have to shrink herself to fit the world around her. Matteo and Sophie were not exceptionally successful, brilliant, or wealthy. They were simply people living with openness. They read not to appear intelligent, practiced yoga not for social media, talked about dreams not to compete, but to uplift each other. No one told Clara she was too dreamy. No one mocked her when she talked about a job she wanted to apply for. No one told her to calm down when she wanted to improve herself. On her first day in that apartment, Clara cried without knowing why. But deep inside, she knew. For the first time in years, she could breathe without feeling someone crushing that breath from behind. It was the moment the unconscious began to self-regulate, when the soul finally touched a kind of light it had been deprived of for too long. A week later, she applied for the job she once feared to try. A month later, she jogged every morning with Matteo, listening to Sophie talk about her new art project. 3 months later, Clara noticed her mind becoming clearer, the heaviness disappearing, inspiration returning, and her work performance doubling. She slept deeper, laughed more, snapped less, as if someone were adjusting the frequency of her soul back into alignment. Jung once said, "The psyche grows where it is mirrored with acceptance. The soul grows only in places where it is mirrored with acceptance." And that was what Clara received in that apartment. Not help, but a mirror of authentic souls. They did not heal her with advice. They healed her through presence aligned with the right frequency. One evening, as the 3 of them drank tea on the balcony, Clara said a sentence that remains one of the most important realizations of the inner growth journey. "It's not that I was weak. It's that the energy around me was too impoverished." One sentence, yet it contains the entire essence of the collective unconscious. We do not only breathe oxygen from the air, we breathe energy from the unconscious of the environment. And the right frequency environment can heal you faster than any therapy. From Jung's perspective, when Clara left her parents' house, she did not simply move out. She left a collective shadow that had enveloped her since childhood, a heavy, energetic fog preventing her from seeing herself clearly. And when that collective shadow loosened, the self, the mature essence, began to emerge. Jung once wrote, "No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. And sometimes, hell is not the pain you experienced, but the environment you lived in for so long that you mistook it for normal. After 6 months, Clara moved into her own apartment, a small but bright space filled with her paintings, her plants, and the light she had never previously allowed herself. She said, "I didn't find myself. I simply stood in the place where I could grow." And that is the truth most of us understand only after leaving the place that once suffocated us. If you feel yourself shrinking, exhausted for no reason, losing inspiration, losing trust, losing light, do not rush to believe it is your fault. Do not think you lack discipline, courage, or motivation. Perhaps you are simply like Clara, standing in a room that is suffocating your energy. Ask a gentle but profound question. Does this place allow my soul to breathe? If the answer is no, you do not have to keep fighting. You simply need to step out. Because the right frequency environment does not require you to strain to grow, it allows you to grow naturally, like a seed finding the right soil. And when you stand in the place that truly belongs to you, as Jung said, the soul will know the way back to the light. Number 13. The habit of reauthoring your inner narrative. Reauthoring narrative. Have you ever wondered why, even though you have changed many habits in your life, there is still one thing that keeps you stuck, as if an invisible hand pulls you back to the past every time you try to step forward? It is precisely at the moment you begin to realize that your old habits no longer fit that you move closer to one of the most transformative habits in Carl Jung's philosophy, the habit of rewriting your own inner story. Because in the end, you do not live according to the life you have, you live according to the story you tell about that life. And when the story changes, the unconscious changes. And when the unconscious changes, destiny shifts. Carl Jung once wrote, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." A sentence that appears simple, yet contains a profound psychological principle. You are not defined by memories, but by the way you retell those memories in the present. Your life is not written by events, but by the meaning you assign to them. And if the meaning changes, the story changes. If the story changes, the future will be rewritten. A friend of mine was 34 years old, but always believed she was not good at anything. She said that as a child, every time she made a mistake on her homework, her mother would sigh and say, "Why are you so slow? All your friends can do this already." And so for 20 years, she carried that story, the story of inadequacy, of not being worthy of anything good. When she applied for jobs, she always said, "I know for sure they won't choose me." When she fell in love, she whispered to her friends, "I'm sure he'll leave me eventually." Not because reality said so, but because her inner story had already written the ending. One day, in a therapy session, the therapist asked her, "Are you sure this is your story? Or is it the story of a child who once needed to be loved, but never heard any words of affirmation?" That question made her stay silent for a long time. Then, for the first time, she tried to rewrite her own story. "I am not inadequate. I was simply a child who was not seen in the right way." A few months later, she said, "With just one new story, my whole life changed." She applied for a new position and got accepted. She ended a painful relationship and stepped into a kinder love. All because she no longer lived as the helpless character in her old tale, she became the author of her new story. Rewriting your inner narrative is, in essence, the most fundamental Jungian awakening step. Because the unconscious is governed by symbols and stories. When you change your story, you are changing the symbolic system the unconscious uses to guide you. If in the old story you are the weak one, the unconscious will lead you into situations that prove that. If in the new story you are the one growing, the unconscious will send experiences that help you expand. That is why many people change their environment, but their fate remains the same, because their inner story has not changed. In Greek mythology, there is the story of Theseus entering the labyrinth to face the Minotaur, the half-man, half-bull creature representing the shadow in each person. People often remember only that he killed the Minotaur. But the most important part of the story is not the victory, but the red thread Ariadne gave him. The red thread did not make him stronger, did not make him faster, but it kept him from getting lost. It allowed him to rewrite his journey from within the labyrinth instead of being controlled by it. And that is exactly what the habit of rewriting your inner narrative gives you. A thread to walk out of the maze of old memories, distorted beliefs, and the stories someone else accidentally or intentionally wrote for you. No one lives without being wounded, but the wound is not what determines who you are. The story you tell about that wound is what determines it. The one who says, "I failed," will live like a failure. The one who says, "I am learning," will live like someone who is growing. The one who says, "I was abandoned," will shrink in fear. The one who says, "I am free to start again," will step forward with courage. The same event, but two different destinies, all depending on the story. Modern psychology calls this skill narrative reframing. But Jung looked deeper. He believed that rewriting the story is how humans converse with the unconscious. When you rewrite a painful memory, you are not denying it. You are giving it a new meaning so that it no longer controls you from the dark. Try looking back at your life. Is there a story you have told yourself so many times that it has become your identity? The story of family pain, the story of a broken relationship, the story of poverty, the story of being treated unfairly, the story of things you cannot change. Those stories may once have been your truth, but they do not need to be the truth of your future. Every day you have the right to rewrite, not to deceive yourself, but to free yourself from an old role. Some people ask, "But what if that story once hurt me deeply?" The answer is, rewriting the story is not to deny the pain, but to give the pain a new purpose, so that it no longer becomes a burden, but becomes a lantern guiding your way. Like the image of a candle burning in the night, the light does not erase the darkness, but makes the darkness less frightening. Imagine your life as an open book. You cannot fix the pages already written, but you can decide how to write the next chapters. A character may begin in despair, but that does not mean they must end in hopelessness. No tragedy forces you to repeat it, unless you continue to tell that tragic story every day. You can choose to rewrite the old narrative. "I was not loved" into "I am learning to love myself." "I am always rejected" into "I am finding the place that truly fits me." "I failed" into "I tried and I will try again." When the sentences you tell yourself change, the energy inside you changes. When energy changes, behavior changes. When behavior changes, reality changes. The most miraculous part is, you do not need to immediately believe the new story. You only need to repeat it enough times for the unconscious to begin believing. And when the unconscious believes, the world reflects it. Rewriting your story is also how you reclaim the power you once gave others, the power to define who you are. Because throughout childhood, you lived in stories others wrote, parents, teachers, society. But at some point, you must hold the pen yourself. You must ask, does this story still fit me? If not, you have the right to change it, whether others like it or not. Everything begins with the story you tell yourself tonight. And if you are at a stage where you feel you need a new page, consider this section a reminder that you can rewrite it. No one can do it for you, but no one can stop you either. The future is not something you wait for. It is something you are writing right now. Number 14, the habit of connecting with the self, living from the self. There is a deeper layer of the transformation journey, a layer Carl Jung considered the final convergence point of all inner paths, connecting with the self. If the previous habits helped you shed illusions, overcome fears, stand firm in solitude, and no longer be shaken by the reactions of the world, then this habit is the place where you return to your deepest root, where you are no longer pulled by external forces, no longer driven by momentary emotions, no longer lost in echoes of the past. This is where your soul becomes clear, steady, and unmoving like a mountain. Jung once wrote, "The self is our life's goal, for it is the completest expression of that fateful combination we call individuality." When you live from the self, you no longer search for life. Life aligns itself around you. Connecting with the self is not a technique, nor is it a mystical moment of enlightenment, as many imagine. It is a daily habit, a way of living, where you return to your deepest center, like a sailor who always looks to the North Star to keep his direction, no matter how turbulent the waves become. When you touch the self, you step into the flow of what is right, not right by social morality, but right by the soul, right by the frequency the universe wove specifically for you. There was a woman I once met in a 7-day meditation retreat. She had a stable job, a stable family, even a life that anyone looking from the outside would consider complete. But inside, she always felt as if she was living someone else's life. Every morning she woke up feeling like she was about to step into a role. When I asked what made her join the retreat, she said, "I don't know who I am anymore. I know I'm capable. I know I'm hard-working, but I'm not sure if that's me or just a habit to please others." On the 3rd day of the retreat, usually the day when the mind begins to resist, she cried when the meditation teacher asked, "If there were no roles, no expectations, no one watching you, who are you?" That question shattered the shell she had carried for decades. After the retreat, she did not immediately change her job or relationships, but she changed her way of living. She spent 10 minutes every morning reconnecting with herself before touching the world. And she said, "I realized I had never truly lived before. I was only reacting." That is the essence of the self, not to react, but to be present. The self is like a deep lake. The surface is emotions, thoughts, daily fluctuations, reactions, fears, societal expectations, and the stories others place upon you. But the deeper you go, the more still the water becomes, the clearer it is, untouched by the wind. When you learn to live from that deeper layer, you are no longer pulled by the winds on the surface. You become the observer, not the one swept away by small waves of emotion. Jung believed that the self is not something you have to create, but something you must remove the dust to see. Like the sculptor Michelangelo, who said he did not carve statues, he merely removed the excess to release the form already within. Connecting with the self is the same. You do not become someone else. You simply return to the person you have always been. One of my favorite stories about touching the self is the story of a Japanese Zen master. Once, a student asked, "Master, how do I find my path?" The Zen master did not answer. He simply took the student into the forest. He broke off a branch and threw it to the ground. The branch fell in a certain direction. He said, "The branch falls that way, not because it thinks, but because it follows its nature. Humans are the same. When you stop trying to become someone, you will see yourself fall into the right direction." The story seems simple, but it contains what Jung spent his entire life studying. When you live from the self, your actions become as natural as the falling branch. No forcing, no comparison, no fear of being wrong. Only the natural rightness. Connecting with the self every day is not a complex ritual. No need for deep meditation, no need to escape to the mountains, no need to change your whole life. Sometimes it begins with very small things. Sitting still for 5 minutes without touching your phone, writing down a truthful thought without self-editing, walking slowly without chasing the noise of the world, pausing for a few seconds before reacting, taking a deep breath before making a difficult decision. Each of those moments is like a bridge leading you back to your own center. The self is not a static state, it is a relationship. The more you connect with it each day, the more it guides you in the right direction. And when you live from the self, life cannot go wrong, because the direction does not come from others, but from your soul. Jung once wrote, "The self is not only the center, but also the whole circumference which embraces both conscious and unconscious." The self is not only the center, it is the circle that encompasses your entire being, even the parts you have never touched. When you live from the self, you no longer fear your own darkness, because you understand that darkness also belongs to that circle. You no longer fear judgment, because your worth does not come from the outside. You no longer fear being wrong, because every step has meaning in the journey of return. Imagine the self as a flame inside a lantern. If the lantern is dusty, the light dims. If it is covered by cloth, the light cannot pass through. But when you clean each layer of persona, each layer of shadow's fear, each layer of old wounds, that light shines brightly. Not because you turned it on, but because it was always there, just covered for too long. If today you feel lost, confused, or unsure of what is right, understand that you are not broken, not weak, not failing. You have simply been too far from your center. Come back. Sit down. Breathe. Write. Look inward instead of outward. The self never disappears. It only waits for you to return. And when you live from the self, truly live, life begins to revolve in a new order. Every decision becomes clearer. Every relationship becomes less tangled. Every action gains weight. Because you no longer fit yourself into a mold. You become the mold. When you look back at the entire journey that the 12 habits from the Carl Jung will completely transform your life has taken you through, from identifying the deepest unconscious layers to rebuilding inner order, to opening habits that can transform your entire psychological life, you will realize you are no longer the person who began this video. Each habit Jung left is not just an action. They are architectural pieces, quietly reconstructing your soul, silently but steadily, until one day you realize you are standing at a completely different level of awareness. You will see that transformation does not arrive in the moments you feel strong, but in the moments you feel weak and still continue. Jung wanted you to remember that strength already lives within you. You do not need to chase change. You are where change begins. You do not need to wait for the world to see you. Your presence itself makes the world respond. And when you live as someone awakened, someone who knows who they are, knows what their soul needs, acts from a center that cannot be shaken, you no longer seek success as a reward. You become the cause. Success becomes the natural consequence. If this video awakened something in you, an awareness, a memory, a frequency you had forgotten, share it with someone who is walking through dark places as you once did. And if you want to continue this journey, the journey back to the self, back to inner order, back to the person you have always been capable of becoming, subscribe so you don't miss the next videos. Each video will be a doorway, a light, a reminder that your soul has never been lost. It has only been finding its way back to itself. Because when you practice these 12 habits long enough, you will no longer need to try believing in yourself. You will live as the proof. And from that moment on, nothing and no one will be able to stop you.